The Australian Commonwealth, not the Australian Commonwealth, the Australian colonies joined together and paid for two very high-ranking British engineers, Royal Engineers, William Drummond Jarvis and Peter Scratchley. And they visited the colonies and they wrote reports to the government recommending strategies for coastal defence. And each colony took those recommendations and they either built fortifications or modernised already existing fortifications based on their recommendations. So Fort Scratchley is named after Peter Scratchley, but Peter Scratchley actually supervised the construction of this fort as well. So you'll probably see a few similarities. They recommended coastal defence from batteries over minefields. So there was a minefield at Fort Scratchley as well back in that period. So, anybody been to any of the other forts around Australia?
In Bradby Island.
Yes?
I went to one in Thursday Island.
Yes, there's a kissing point up there. Anywhere else?
Bradby Island?
Yeah, Bradby.
Fort Lars?
Bradby Island. Bradby Island.
Oh, and Bradby.
Yeah, it's a small one.
There's the smaller little areas there.
Yeah.
These forts from the colonial period are all very similar, but Fort Lytton is unique for two reasons. Firstly, it is the lowest lying of all those coastal fortifications from that colonial period. And secondly, it is the only fort with a moat. An actual body of water surrounding the fortifications. Now, of course, Fort Scratchley and the other ones will have defensive ditches. It's part of the design of a fortification. But this is the only one that can be filled with water because it's the lowest lying. Now, low lying is not a good defence if you can't see your enemy. So the only reason they recommended this battery at this level is because over there's Signal Hill. And Signal Hill allows for views of the entire body of water that is Moreton Bay. So there was a communication between these two places. They were part of the same defence reserve. Today, of course, we're not using the fort, we're using Signal Hill. But that's because we're mainly concerned with communications here. All right, now we're going to take a walk into the fort. So, follow me. Alright, so here we are in the parade ground, and we're surrounded by the walls of the fort. Where do the walls of the fort come from? Well, they came from the excavation of that moat. It's designed to be hidden. So, we have a pentagonal fortification. Gun pits 1 and 2 are directly looking out through the mouth of the Brisbane River. Gun pits 3 and 4 are looking out across that area where the minefield was. From the water, Fort Lytton looks like a hill. So it was covered in earth and growth was encouraged so that you can't distinguish the fortification from Moreton Bay. Now, the fort's changed over the years. These are not the original designs of the gun pits because the guns that were originally in the fort were all muzzle loaders. Now, have we got any arty men here? All right, well, I'll have to explain it then. A muzzle loader is a gun that is loaded from the point where What goes in comes out the same hole. What the commanders wanted was the latest, the best. So within 8 years of the fort opening and operating, those guns were removed. The old 80-pounder muzzle loaders were removed, and new guns were brought here. All right? So let's just go into this casemate now. I want to play a game of cricket in the playground. I never got to Italy. Never played on shell green. Never fooled the Turks. Well, I got to Egypt and I went to Ilya camp for training, and then I was selected to get on a vessel to go to Lemnos, which is the stopping off ground for going to Gallipoli, and never boarded. It was November, plans had changed. So I never actually went to Gallipoli. The plans had changed because the campaign was obviously not succeeding. The Turks were putting up a mighty fight, and winter was coming on, and that area of the Mediterranean experiences extreme storms throughout the autumn and winter each year. Those storms were breaking up the jetties and landing fields that had been erected along the coast at Anzac. That put engineers and pioneers under enormous stress, because if those piers broke up, those forces would be isolated, and an isolated force couldn't fight. So the imperative was to get the men off the island. Now, I'm in Egypt, a long way away from everything, but word gets around that the troops will be returning, right? So what I'm going to tell you now is what I heard from my comrades who were at Gallipoli. Most of the troops were taken off at night. Men were issued with cloth to muffle their boots, and they would leave their trenches in a quiet march, and then other men would go into those trenches and set up self-firing rifles and boom traps. And in the day, they would continue. Oh, self-firing rifle. What's that? All right, imagine this is a rifle. Put it that way around, I think. You have a can of water dripping into a second can that is empty, and that can has a string attached to the trigger. When the weight of the water falling into the second can gets to the critical point, it pulls the string and fires the gun. So they were setting up these guns in the trenches so that during the day, an abandoned trench could still be firing.
Was this an Australian ingenuity?
Yes, it was. It was actually the idea of an engineer. Yeah. I wasn't there. I don't think I was actually that clever, or ever have been that clever. Signalling is much more suited to me. Engineers tend to be monash as an engineer. So anyway, it worked. Ray volunteered with the 2nd Light Horse Troop signallers to be the very last men to leave Anzac. And for that, he did get a mention in the statutes. Very high on. There were about 80,000 men on that peninsula. I think 2 were killed. They drowned. It was massive. So it was amazing. When they came back to Egypt, and they came to Ishmaelia camp, and I remember cricket match, yes. One of the diversions to make the Turks think that everything was just the same with the Australians was to go up on the. I've never been to London. It's very, it's cliffs, isn't it? Very steep, and there's only one area that is flat. And so the Australians had played cricket on that patch of land. But of course, they were overlooked by the Turks. So every now and then, a pop shot or a shell would be logged. And they'd run away and get away from it. So that very last weekend, the last weekend before Christmas that year, Ray took photographs playing cricket as a memento. Oh, so arrived back in Egypt, troops come back to Ilya, and I'm lined up because I'm one of the reinforcements, and Ray goes along and he just looked at me very briefly and said, "Made it at last, Paris." So that was the first time I'd seen my commander. And then everything changed, didn't it? Because now the Australian divisions were going to go to the Western Front, and we needed more divisions. So the decision was made that the two divisions in Egypt would be split. And half of each division would go to make a third and fourth division. A fourth and fifth division, because the troops that had been sent to England would form the third and demolished. So they were going to form the third division. So what happened with our troop, second line of signalers, we were moved to the fifth division and became the fifth division's signals company. Right? So we trained as the 5th Division, and then we had to go and fight at the Suez Canal. This often gets overlooked in the history of things because it literally stands so high. But our very first action as the Australian divisions, the 1st, 2nd, 4th and 5th, was actually at the Suez Canal. And that is a story in itself, which I will not touch. But it was a very, very long march and extremely exhausting for us. However, we served on the Suez Canal, and then we were going to go to France. We left Egypt, Alexandria. I left on the 20th of June on a vessel called the Canada. And I remember the voyage from Egypt to France. What year was that? 1916. So I remember it well because my birthday was on that voyage and I was 20 years old. So I remember that. It was beautiful spring crossing the Mediterranean to France. Oh, but let's go and have a look at the gun up there. Whilst it's still here. Come. I'll have a little look around it. Now, have a look around, but I'll describe what we're looking at from this position, where you can see the working mechanism. Alright, so here we have a 6-inch gun. 6-inch gun, of course, is the diameter of the barrel. Right? So it's got an opening that is 6 inches in diameter. It's a breech loading gun because it hasn't just got a hole at that end of the barrel, it's got a hole at this end of the barrel, and because it's got a hole here at the breech, it's a breech loading gun, but it has to have a huge breech lock in order to seal the end of the barrel. Because when the explosion happens in here, if there's any gap in the sealant of this lock, then the explosion will go both ways. And we don't want that. We want the explosion going that way. We want the projectile going that way. Now this gun has been in this gun pit since 1893. So the whole gun pit was changed, the casemate down there was changed. The new gun would fire 100-pounder shells. So that's why those casemates are big, because they're housing large shells. And they're heavy. So the hoist system has been taken down, but what you would do is place your shell in the sling. You would hoist it up with ropes and pulleys, so it's at the level of this door, so that all you have to do is give it a final swing and into the open breech. So it's all about getting more efficient, getting faster. Whilst it's a 6-inch gun, whilst it's a breech loading gun, we always refer to it as the disappearing gun, because it's a hydro-pneumatic mount that the gun is held on. So, this was the latest in technology back in the 1880s. So, here's a pump, and this is to pump air into the cylinder to get your air pressure. The little wheel you've got there, and the other wheel on the other side, these turn the whole carriage. So the carriage is like a carousel, and it can turn around. And when you're wanting to turn it, is the degrees that represent Morton Bay. So that brass plate has the degrees on, so that you know exactly where you're turning your barrel, if you're turning in that direction or that direction. There's another wheel on the other side at this point, and that controls these arms. And those arms control the angle of the barrel. So if you want to elevate it, or if you want to depress the barrel, you can do so. This is all to do with trajectory, of course. How do you hit a moving object? You have to lob a shell at it, don't you? So that's all being worked out by officers. They're plotting it all out. Of course, when you fire this gun, you have an open plate above here, so the shield is not completely covered. There is an opening. And when you're ready to release the gun, it's this handle here that does so. So on the call to stand by, this is released. It releases the pressure in the cylinder. The piston is in the cylinder, so it is forced out of the cylinder with that air pressure, and it is the piston that lifts the barrel. How high does the barrel go? Well, this is the arm. So that would go up there. So it's above the wall of the parapet, above the shield as well. Now, the Armstrong Company patented this gun because the mount isn't just hydro-pneumatic in getting the gun up, it also works in reverse. So that once the explosion takes place in the barrel, the recoil, that kickback, actually brings the barrel back down, pushing the piston back into the cylinder, repressurizing the system. So that you can then open the breech, clean out the debris, put in a fresh shell, get the right position, coordinates again, and be ready to fire. The firing doesn't have to be done up there either. The bombardier can be down here, safely below the shield, using electricity to cause the explosion. So electric cable going into the breech, causing a detonation. This fort was always meant for the use of electricity. So in that sense it was a modern fortification 60 years ago. These guns are now going, and of course the 6-inch guns on Morton Island at Fort Cowan will be the first examination battery, and therefore the first in line for the defence of Brisbane. Yes?
How many people did it take to operate and load the gun?
Alright, so I've described quite a lot. I didn't mention your man up standing on the shield, listening for the instructions being given from the officer, shouting them down. But how many people do you think it would take to operate a gun of this size that is so complex?
6.
Yeah, I think 6, yeah.
You think 6?
Yeah.
Alright, you need a couple more. The gun crew for this gun has always been 8. And 8 men working in cooperation, coordinating, working at their fastest, they can fire a 100-pound shell every 75 seconds. So that includes loading it, angling it, it going up, it firing, coming back down, and then being reloaded. So that's 75 seconds from the point that you begin to the point that it fires. It would only give an advantage. This was built in case enemy battleships tried to raid Brisbane for food and fuel. A vessel travelling in the Pacific that's in need of food and fuel is going to be desperate. So we fire and we hit it. It comes back down, they look around, nothing, a hill. It gives an advantage of maybe 1, 2, 3 firings maximum. But you must remember there are 2 guns, both firing 100-pounder shells. However, on the deck of that battleship, there'll be quite a few 6-inch guns ready to fire back as soon as they identify where they are being attacked from. So it never happened. No enemy battleships ever came, but men trained here. Fort Lytton was a training ground. The very first men to leave Australia to go and fight in the Boer War, they left from the wharf here at Fort Lytton. And I was one of the ones who went off to fight, having trained here. How many thousands of the men who fought in the war were trained at Fort Lytton? And how many of the men who fought in the First War were officers and generals from Fort Lytton? Right, we're going to go down these steep steps. All the fort steps are steep, yes. What was the Boer War? My goodness, my goodness. I suppose the Great War has come to dominate everything, but the Boer War was a war fought in Africa, South Africa. Yes, Australia played its part. Australia played its part. All right, we're just going to wait in here just a moment. I'll just explain what we're looking at here. So we'll just stay here for a moment just to have a look at things. All right, so this is the magazine passage. And a magazine for us in the army is where we store our explosives. So those rooms down there were originally built for gunpowder, black powder. But the disappearing guns need a stronger propellant, a more forceful propellant, and so the rooms are actually for cordite now. But they're both explosives, both extremely dangerous. So when Jarvis and Scratchley designed this fort, they had to pay great consideration to where explosives would be stored and how they would be stored. So we're in a very small passage with a very pronounced arch. It's a very strong structure. This area has to withstand a bombardment because the battleship that's being fired on could fire back, and if you got a direct hit here, well, forget about the fort, forget about fighting, everything would be destroyed. So to protect these rooms, a great deal of materials have been used. And the rooms themselves, they're at parade ground level, low. They're within a structure, the centre of a structure, they're like a cave. And the materials around them, well, you've got those very, very soft sandstone steps and lintels on the doors and windows. And you've also got pitch on the floors, walls and ceilings of that area. So everything is to mitigate against a spark or the beginning of a fire. And there was a very strict drill for going in there as well. So what we're going to use them for now? Well, we'll use them for storage, but probably not of anything explosive. Right, come this way. No. forgot. No, 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 no. Australia will be there. Australia will be there. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? When we arrived at Marseille and were entrained to travel through the whole of France to the north, we wore our voices hoarse because every time we went through a village or town through their railway station, there'd be lots of French people there to wave, and we'd be screaming it out of the carriages, even at peasants working in the fields as we passed. It was beautiful. It was summertime. We went through Paris. We didn't stop. And we went to Hazebrook, further north. And we had a lot of marching to do, but I do remember it was the very end of June, and you could hear it. So we're up, near Armentières, and we could hear what was happening down on the Somme. And we thought, oh, what's that battle? But it wasn't a battle that we heard. It was the bombardment. They bombarded the Germans for 7 days before the Battle of the Somme. And the Battle of the Somme took place on the 1st of July. And we're just settling in our different camps. And we hear the figure, the death toll for that first day is 60,000 casualties. And that was very sobering, very sobering. Now, we went to the nursery. That sounds nice, doesn't it? The nursery is where troops freshly arrived to the front go in order to get accustomed to what trench war is. Of course we've done trenches with the Suez Canal, but nothing like these systems. So, we are getting ready to go into battle. We know the date we're going to fight is the 19th of July. So we're getting ready. And we're signallers, so we have to get the communications prepared. And it was the 15th of July, and it was summer, so there was still daylight. So we set off at 7 p.m. Charlie, myself, Alfred, and Tommy. And what we're doing is just laying the line. So you have a reel, and you have 2 handles, and you run out the line. There was 4 of us, because it's tiring. So you swap over. And so and then you take it. Now it's just getting familiar with trench systems, and every trench has a dugout, which is an area where you can be more protected. It's a larger area than the actual trench. So, still daylight. So, a shell lands damn close, and we all dive into the dugout. And strategy. We'll take the line next, me and Charlie, and you run along behind us. Then we'll go to that dugout and you take over, right? That's the strategy. So we're running along the line, and sure enough, and huge explosion. Charlie and I are running for the dugout, we get thrown into the dugout. And we realised that was much closer than the last line. Tommy was dead. Oh yes, no question. We've got the ambulance, the 8th Field Ambulance. Shells, you know, they rip, they really rip. He died by the time they got him to the hospital. He and Tommy were the first recorded deaths of Australians from the 5th Division. We hadn't even got into battle. We hadn't even got into battle. That's what it was like being at the front. There was never any moment of security or safety. Once you were there, we were there. So we set up for the 19th, everything on communication, everything. And the bombardment was only short, 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock on that day. And then at 6 o'clock, and over the top. Disastrous, absolutely disastrous. We were fighting with the 61st British Division, and they were supposed to take out all the machine gun emplacements. And then our 8th Brigade and our 15th Brigade would then go in from different sides. And that was the plan. That was how it planned out. So nobody told us that the British had been unable to take the machine gun emplacements and had retreated. British command didn't think that was important information. So our troops went out. The 8th got quite a way forward, but they couldn't find the second line of trench systems. There's usually 3 lines of trench systems. So they got through the first, couldn't find the second. So they dug into an area. Then Ilya sent out his 15th, and that's when they found out that the machine gun emplacements were still in place. So he sent off to British command to halt the action. And his communications were ignored. Now it was dark, and those machine guns were still going. And then it came to dawn, and soldiers were told to retreat. But the 8th were really far in. The rest of the 15th Brigade were just being mown down as they got back, but they weren't as far in. And at 8 o'clock, the 8th Brigade were told they had to retreat in full daylight. And it was just a butcher's shop. It was just carnage. And at the end of that 24-hour action, 5,500 of our division, the 5th Division, were dead casualties or prisoners of war. We were so under strength, we were sent away, and we only resumed our defence of the Somme in the October. We were well under force, we were well under strength, we were waiting for reinforcements. Ilya never recovered. Never, ever recovered from that day. We went into the worst winter in 20 years. And Ray's family became seriously ill. And he was sent to England. And we just didn't think we'd see him again. We didn't think we'd see him again. Now, do you know what that is? Does anyone know what it is?
Yes,
It's more for my kid.
Yes,
gas mask. Gas mask. Have you ever seen anything like this? Alright. Can I have a look inside? It is heavy. Well, I'd leave that bit in, take that mask out. Pretty thing, isn't it? Gas mask bags. Everyone was issued with them. Nobody liked wearing them. If you'd like to put it on, son, you're welcome to do so.
Can I do it?
Yes. Now, that's a bit small, that's a bit big for you. Though the rubber is to suction against your skin, and you just breathe through the cylinder. We had to have them. It was entirely necessary. Gas attacks. If they don't kill you, they totally incapacitate you. And so many times we've been making movements through this, going back and forth, wherever you were going, and you'd see fields of men with their eyes bandaged, you'd hear them with their coughing and wheezing. Yes, it's a terrible thing, and so you have to have that. And it's not light, is it? It's not light, that's just one part of your kit. So, yeah. Nasty war. And you just pass it along and feel how light it is. It's got material in it that will absorb the gas, which is heavier than air. So the gas is poured in that container, allowing you to breathe the oxygen. However, it is extremely uncomfortable, it is very difficult to see, and many a man died because he took his own life. Yes?
Were you all issued with those prior to arrival?
We were. We trained in Egypt. Very strange. But we were all issued. And yes, we took our kit to France. All right, let's go this way.
Stay
All right. Now, submarine mining ended 30 years ago, but the detonation of the mines in the Brisbane River were controlled from this area of the fort. Now, you can't see the river, can you? So what there is through here is a tunnel. It's 59 feet long, and at the end of it there's this opening, an aperture, that allows you to see where the minefield is. So what you can see through that opening is the extent of the minefield. And this was the control room. But the detonation actually took place at the end of the passage. The submarine miner who was there observing the enemy battleship moving upriver would be able to detonate those mines. And they'd be able to register which mines are being exploded. So we've still got the remains of the equipment. It's in a very fragile state, but if you want to come in and if you want to go down the passage, it is dark, it is long, you're welcome to do so. Pack everything, put it out again, and it's a Queensland tradition, you just come back the next day. So the governor came back, the band came back, and people came back, and at the designated time, probably 12 o'clock at noon, the detonation happened and everybody cheered. The reason I'm saying it's a Queensland tradition is because when Queensland was declared a separate British colony, the vessel that was bringing the proclamation and the new governor, Governor Bowen, took 5 days. It was 5 days late. So the crowds just hung around in Brisbane waiting each day for the arrival. And it didn't dull the celebrations on the 10th of December. And there's Ray again up there. And of course, you know, irony of ironies, Lord Kitchener lost his life to a sea mine, which was not controlled, it was an uncontrolled mine. During the, well, we had a ceremony in Egypt for him, so that would be June 1916.
Scout the flag.
Scout the flag? I think that was the name, yes.
It's a shipping zone, wasn't it?
No, it was
It's an area of he was going to Norway or coming back from Norway, and the vessel just hit a mine, and that was the end of the greatest soldier of the British Empire. I was just saying how Lord Kitchener lost his life to a sea mine, an uncontrolled mine, that hit his vessel in June 1916. That was the end of Lord Kitchener.
Brains behind it.
Was he a cook?
That's the biggest gin.
I don't think, I can't imagine Lord Kitchener.
No.
He was an earl, and he was the highest ranking soldier in the British Empire, greatly respected, and yes, he went to Gallipoli. The November 1915, when everything was looking, it's just not working, he was the one who agreed. He said, no, it's not working, so evacuate.
9 months after, I'm sure.
9 months of fighting, and yes, the Kiwis did manage to take the high ground back in, when was it, the August, but lost it immediately. So they got the high ground where they could. The whole point of Gallipoli was to take control of the Dardanelles. The only way to take control of the Dardanelles Strait was to get rid of their fortifications, which had submarine mining. So the idea was to go from Gallipoli, go from the western side, take the high ground, destroy the forts from behind, because just like here, we have no defence that way, and then the British Navy would be able to go to Constantinople, train its guns on Constantinople, Turkey, Ottoman Empire would be out of the war. That was the whole point of Gallipoli.
You control the ice-free port.
Yes, Yes, and once you've got, and then you come up to Germany you can come from both sides. It was a strategy, but it was just what they didn't calculate was the fact that the Turks would be so determined to keep their own. Right, this way.
In our division alone, 500 men were killed in the fighting that happened over those months. And winter is never the time for major effects anyway. So they just do kind of run-of-the-mill trench warfare, firing at each other. 1,500 of our men took sick. We all got trench foot. So that was just half the course. Ray, seriously ill, nearly died, pneumonia. Survived. Came back at the end of March. At the end of March, they made him a major. So no longer captain Stanley, but Major Stanley. And he came and took charge of us on school. What were we getting ready for?
You're funny.
Well, we engaged at Bully Cool, but the big one was Liss. Now, it was a huge segment, and the Germans had it. And the strategy was to tunnel under the hill. Yeah? And lay as many explosives as we had. And on the given day, detonate them all. Right? They said that explosion was heard in London. At that time, it was the biggest man-made explosion that had ever taken place on the planet. And it was the beginning of one hell of a year. Gallipoli used to get to Constantinople by getting rid of the fortifications all along the straits. What was crippling the armies was the U-boats and the German ships. Because they had the ports of Belgium, which were channel ports, and meant they had easy access to the Atlantic and the North Sea. So the strategy was this time that we'll get to those Belgian ports and we'll destroy the U-boats and the German fleet. We'll just destroy everything. We didn't get very far. We got halted from the place where we started. A little place called Ypres. Although some of the Tommies called it Lifeless. And we didn't get much further. We were in Flanders, and every action we took created more and more mud. So we were just fighting the mud. And from that point we went on to Menin Road. And then on to standing on wood. I've never seen a bushfire, but I saw a polygon wood. There was so much artillery fire that the whole place took blaze. How any of us survived it, I do not know. And many did, many did. And then we became part of the offensive at Pol Capel. And then just to round off a year of madness, we went into Passchendaele. And who was going to stop it? Who was going to stop it? Eventually Haig stopped it. Eventually Haig said, let's end this action. How many thousands? Now it's not just us, the British, Canadians. It was a terrible year. And somehow I got to the end of it. And things changed, and not necessarily for the better. The Russian front collapsed, didn't it? November 1917. And so I remember at the beginning of the year, but then the revolution happened, and the Russians just turned home. This meant that 35 German divisions were now freed up. And those 35 German divisions on the Eastern Front had 1,000 pieces of artillery still at their disposal. So as we went into the end of that year, and the fighting got less, because it's winter, and it's hard to fight, we didn't have much hope. This could go on for years. But we got a rest, and I actually took leave. And I took the opportunity with Charlie to go to London. And have you been to London? Trafalgar Square, the Strand, Piccadilly, Buckingham Palace. We had a ball. We had a wonderful time. And the reason we had such a wonderful time is because as soon as people recognised you as an Australian, they couldn't do enough for you. And so you could literally hang around outside a swanky hotel, and it wouldn't be long before the doorman was saying, oh, boy, you've been invited in. You've been invited in. It was never for a drink, it was always for morning tea or afternoon tea or something like that. We were happy enough. And Charlie was such an entertainer. And this posh lady, she said, tell me, how often do you get leave? And Charlie, once every war. Of course, we didn't get leave. The war ended before we got our leave home. Anyway, and what was it? Oh, yes. There was this hall, and the parish were putting on sandwiches for soldiers. And they said, Australians, come in, yes, please, come in. And we went in there and had some sandwiches and cordial and whatever. And the vicar said, what do you do all day in the trenches? And Charlie said, we sit around chatting. And every fella in that hall who was a soldier roared laughing. And all the parishioners were, what's a strange group of men? But, sorry ladies, but when you're at the front, you don't get the chance to have a bath. You don't get a chance to wash your clothes. So you get some companions. And you can't get them out of your uniform unless you remove your uniform. You get the seams and you get a candle and you get that and you burn the lice. Right? But for some reason, we didn't call them lice, we called them chats. during 1917, the Germans did pull back. And they pulled back to a point called the Hindenburg Line. On the 1st of March, no, the 21st of March, 1918, all hell broke loose. Operation Michael began. And the re-strengthened German army came at us. And within 5 days, they'd taken everything it had taken us 2 years to gain. 5 days. Within 5 days, they were 35 miles from Paris. And as we all knew, the day Paris fell, it would be the end of the war. Germany would have won. But we were alright. We didn't have to worry, did we? Because now the Americans were in the war. Over there, send the word, over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums drumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't be back till it's over there. That song's in Yes, get here. Somebody's locked the doors. It's not a big space. I'm just getting McLean there to open the doors so we get a bit more air, a bit more light. These are the magazine stores, and this is part of the system. These are the Ante Rooms, so you get rid of any metal and you get rid of your uniform and you put on protective clothes and you'd light a lantern in the recess here, and that would be your light. And rooms are very, very dark, and then you'd enter through the double door system. So the first door would open and you step in to the door at the recess and you'd close the door, and then you turn around and open the inner door and go into the room. You always had to do that drill because the explosives are extremely volatile. So you don't want to deny them air, you want to give them as much air as possible, but you don't want to drum. You don't want them to become stale. So the system worked, obviously. Here we are, stood in the area. And that was how you dealt with explosives there. The Americans. 5 divisions arrived by March, but they were untrained. An American division is twice the size of a British division. So it's a lot of men, but not any experience. And they got themselves into a lot of difficulties. It had taken us a while to get used to the trench systems and everything. Now what date is it today? Oh yes, it's Anzac Day, isn't it? Anzac Day 1918 was a moment to celebrate. It was the beginning of a turnaround. The British had a little village called Villebreton, 35 miles from Paris, and it was taken by Germans. And the idea was to let it go. But Pompey Elliott, 15th Brigade, and Glasgow, 13th Brigade, said, can we please, to British command, can we please have a go? Can we please have a go at taking it? So they developed a pincer action. The only thing that they were told was that when Glasgow took the north, he was to stay whole, which he ignored and pushed through to the centre of the town. And on the 25th of April 1918, their pincer movement met. Pompey Elliott, he actually ordered a bayonet charge. And it worked. It scared the Germans out. And they took Villebreton. And it meant the Germans were halted. It was the first halting in their progress from those Hindenburg lines. And from that moment on, the job was to push them back to the Hindenburg lines. Now, we liked this because it got us out of the trenches. We were now moving. We weren't fighting a trench war anymore. We were moving. And what we found was that those Germans coming from the east, most of them were young boys coming from Germany. They had no experience. So we started a policy of peaceful penetration, which meant we weren't going into battles, we were just doing our damnedest to disrupt their lines. Anything, if you could think of anything you could do, do it. Don't ask for authority to do it, just do it. In fact, we started to receive information from the ranks and had to pass it on to command what had actually happened. Because give a platoon the opportunity and they'll go and do it. And I remember one platoon coming back, and we're talking about less than 25 men, with over 100 German prisoners. And there were so many that they had to ask the Germans to carry their own guns because they couldn't carry all their guns. And this was happening. And it was inspirational, and we also had John Monash leading the Australian Corps. So we were an army within an army, and he was giving his blessing to all of this. Monash, what a man. Feed your troops on victory. Orchestrate your attacks. And given the chance, that's what he did. And the Battle of Le Hamel. Monash orchestrated that battle. He actually made us all rehearse it. We rehearsed a battle. We all rehearsed what we would be doing at what time and how long it would take us. Now he got it down to 1 hour and 30 minutes. So when we went into battle at Le Hamel, on the 4th of July 1918, we had an hour and a half to do what we were going to do. Did we do it in time? I'm afraid to say we didn't. We went over by 3 minutes. Planned out. That's what engineers do, you see. Think, plan, think of everything. And it was so... British command was so awestruck that that way of conducting battles became the model for the rest of the world. That's what made the difference. We went on, we kept pushing. Amiens. The first time all 5 divisions fought together with Canadians. It was the most complete Allied victory of the whole of the war. Amiens, well, not much further. Saint-Quentin, Albert, and Peronne. The thing is, we got to the Hindenburg Line. Now, when I say Hindenburg Line, that's a misnomer. A trench system is 3 lines. You have your outpost line, which is the first thing you come to. Now, that's lots of barbed wire and trenching, machine gun emplacements, and blockhouses. Right? Once you've got through that, you have to go for another mile before you come to the second line, which again is barbed wire, trenches, machine gun emplacements, blockhouses. How long do you have to go before you get to the third line?
2 miles?
No.
4? 7? 5?
5 miles. So when we hit the Hindenburg Line, that's when the real battle started. So from Amiens onwards, we are in the Hindenburg Line. When did we start fighting that year? We started fighting at Morlancourt before the Breslau. That was in the March. When did we stop fighting? October. When we went to the rest area, we didn't recognise ourselves. We all had beards. We had bits of different uniforms. Most fellas had Mausers. I had Charlie's boot. There's no time when you're fighting. There's no time. You can't stop. You keep going. Are we downhearted? No! Then let your voices ring and all together sing. Are we downhearted? No! Not while Britannia rules the waves, not likely. While we have Tommy on the land and Jack upon the sea, we cannot fret. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but we're not downhearted yet. We got our rest. We got ourselves back together. We were preparing to go back to the front. We had a rest on the Sunday, but the Monday, no, we'd be moving out, back to the front line. It was Monday. It was the 11th of November. There was a delay, and we got the communication through. An armistice at 11 a.m. And one of the young fellows said, Sir, what's an armistice? And Stanley said, I think the war is over. He was right. It was over. But let's move on. The war was over, but there was 155,000 Australians on the Western Front, and we had to get back to England, and then we had to get back home.
For some fellows, that was a 2-year wait. Some, studied, some worked on farms and things like that. I was lucky. I came back in the April of 1919, and of course I didn't go home straight away. A little problem, a little something. The Spanish influenza.
The light horse had gone to fight the Philistines. And they had, I'm talking about my division, aren't I? I mean, they had enormous successes. Those successes happened in 1917. So getting that news kind of bolstered you a little bit. Well, Bathsheba. When that news came through, we were like, they kept going on from strength to strength, and I think it inspired us. I think it inspired Monash to kind of say, let's change this thing around. Let's stop this stalemate. When I came back to Australia, I had to be quarantined. It was half of the course. So with our vessel, the Kashmir, pulled in at the wharf, and we were marched up to Signal Hill, and they had a barbed wire fence around and tents inside because the first fellows who came back, who were told they had to be in quarantine, of course, they nipped out of quarantine and went to the pub. So they were like, no, you can't do that. This is very serious, the Spanish one. And when it did break out, it was serious. Of course, it was serious. I think over just under 1,000 people died in Queensland in that 3 months from when it broke out to when it did. So I was lucky. I was lucky for all sorts of reasons. I'd come back. I did come back, Dad. Here I am. And I was lucky in another respect. Because my wife's fiancé didn't come back. So I married a beautiful girl, and, would she have even looked at me? So I was lucky, and we have a son, Frederick James, named after her fiancé James, and now he's 17. And I think, surely madness can't go on. Surely, when someone's crazy, they shouldn't be in power. And there's so many of them, isn't there? And it's like, we cannot do that again. My son, 17, we can't allow it to happen. So I know we're gearing up for it, but someone has got to see reason. We didn't do all that to have another war. So, Anzac Day. Let us always remember. Thank you for coming to Fort Lytton, to part of that, remembering what happened all those years ago. But I'd like to end in the traditional way. So, goodbye, goodbye. Wipe the tears, baby dear, from your eyes. Although it's hard to part, I know. A victory. Tickled to death to go, don't cry, don't sigh. There's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, napu, toodaloo, goodbye.